All right, so we're going to get this kicked off just right. Everybody's already awake. You've had your coffee. That's terrific. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very honored to be here. I have worked for the Fidelity family of companies for 30 years now. And in that time, for 30 years, thank you, for 30 years, the one thing that I know is that a notary is key, crucial to a real estate transaction, and that without the notary, I don't even know what would happen to our beautiful real estate lives that we have. I have a ton of passion for anything and everything that real estate agents do, that notaries do, because everything that you do has personal liability. Everything. And so I'm incredibly passionate at all times, whether it be a notary that works with me as a colleague or a notary who works with me as an independent contractor, has a full and complete understanding of what those liabilities are. I was telling Stassi earlier that I was a notary when I started in as an assistant escrow officer, and literally it went like this: ding, you're a notary. No training. They gave me a stamp and a journal and said, go get them. So I really have a lot of passion about making sure that notaries truly and completely understand what their role is, especially as it relates to real estate transactions, but truly your role as a notary public in any place, in any type of transaction that you're conducting. One of the cornerstones of title insurance is coverage for fraud and forgery. And that's why we're here today, right? Yeah, because you are the defenders against that fraud and forgery. And I have a couple of different stories that I want to share with you as we talk about this fraud and forgery and how important your role is as we go through this. So this brings me to a story I'd like to share with you. I was at a conference, and at this conference, I was in between sessions, and I happened to be sitting in, a public area. And next to me was a conversation that was going on that I'm going to share with you in just a minute. In order for you to understand the impact of this conversation, you need to understand what knowledge-based authentication is. Now, some of you in this room have the opportunity to provide remote online notarial services. Some of you do not. But it is still something that's coming down. It's coming down where notaries everywhere will have an opportunity to participate in remote online notarization. When I first heard of remote online notarization, I thought, this is going to be riddled with fraud. But then as I've learned about how remote online notarization works and the ways that a signer is identified, I've done a complete 180. I think in some instances, remote online notarization can be better than in person. I don't think it replaces in person, but I do believe that in many cases, remote online notarization can be better. And one of those reasons, this isn't a session about Ron, but one of those reasons is because of the knowledge-based authentication step. Now, this is one of the ways that the signer is identified. This is one of the ways that most RON providers provide that option of ensuring that their software complies with the regulatory demands that are in place. And what it does is it goes through and it identifies a signer by, first of all, collecting information about that signer so that they can then gather information about their credit history and or their history so that they can answer a series of 4 out of 5 correct answers within 2 minutes. So these are questions they should know about themselves and their own credit history so that they can then pass these questions. They only get 2 minutes because they're not supposed to be able to have time to research the answer, right? So here's an example. Which of the following vehicles have you recently owned or leased? This is a question about me, by the way. It gives me 5 options. Now I look through this list and I go, none. And I think it's a trick question. Guess what it is? It is. Some of them could be red herring questions. In this case, the correct answer is I've never been associated with any of these vehicles. So I have 2 minutes to get through these 5 questions, and I have to answer at least 4 out of 5 correct. Fortunately, I passed. Whew. Fortunately, I passed. Okay, back to my story. I'm sitting in the lobby, minding my own business, genuinely minding my own business, but I can't help but overhear the conversation that's happening next to me. And the conversation next to me is between a RON service provider and a woman who owned her own notary company. She's looking at their software, exploring their software, and asks about the knowledge-based authentication process. And this person with the RON provider says, "Oh, don't worry about that. We figured out how to get around that." Oh no, that's not the best part. Are y'all ready for the best part? No. The best part is that they have determined that they can make the questions so general in nature that anybody can pass them. I'll give you an example. This is what I hear. I'm repeating to all of you what I heard. All you have to do is set the questions so low that they're so easy to pass, anybody could pass. For example, the question might be, which Learjet did you own? The Learjet 45, the Learjet 60, or the Learjet 50? Or I've never owned a Learjet. I was appalled. I was so disappointed. And the point of my story to all of you is to be sure that when you are vetting your service providers that you may have the opportunity to work with, that you make sure that their standards are your standards. Yes, thank you. Anybody hear about this vacant land property scam? It is getting so much attention nationwide that even the Secret Service has issued a bulletin about this crime that's happening. So just so you guys all know, I'm going to tell you a story about how we've been under attack with this type of crime, but I want you guys to have an overview of how it works. So according to the Secret Service, and I agree with them, by the way, according to the Secret Service, what happens is that the criminal posing as the property owner will go and identify property. They'll list it for sale, either with a real estate agent or even through Zillow or any of those other opportunities. They'll list a property for sale. They list it below market value in an attempt to attract cash buyers to come in and purchase the property. They will accept cash offers with a fast close, and then they start pushing with an attempt to try to close the transaction as quickly as possible and get away with all the proceeds before the legitimate property owner even knows what happens. Sometimes before the title insurance company knows what happens. And so once the escrow is opened with the escrow and title insurance company, the first thing they do is start pushing. I'll use my own notary. I have my own notary. I'm far too important. I'm sick. I'm in the hospital. I can't do anything. Yeah, no. That's one of the biggest things about this fraud, is making sure that they don't get the opportunity to use their own notary, because the Secret Service has identified that in many instances what they're doing is impersonating a notary, or of course getting one of their co-conspirators who's not an actual commissioned notary to participate in assisting them. Here's the details of this one. In this particular example, the escrow officer decided that it would be ideal to have the signer sign utilizing RON. I think she's pretty smart, right? Okay, they have to pass the knowledge-based authentication, they have to pass the credential analysis. I think this is a good plan. Here's where it broke down. The first signing comes, and the first signing was done. It wasn't done, it was attempted, but the signer could not pass the knowledge-based authentication. Tried twice, couldn't pass. Here's the breakdown. Breakdown number one. The notary didn't tell the escrow officer this happened. Instead, rescheduled a new signing for the next day with the signer. And in this particular instance, the company that was conducting the signing placed it with a notary who could alter the difficulty of the notary questions, or the KBA questions. The guy showed up at the signing in a bathrobe, and when the notary conducting the RON signing asked the signer what his name was. He looked up at somebody else in the room for the answer. He couldn't figure out what his date of birth was until he put his hands on his passport, which was clearly shoveled in with a bunch of other passports. And when he held up his passport, it is clear that it is a fake. There is no questioning, even in a video, that it is fake. Now, I don't know the notary. I have not interviewed the notary, but here's my impression. My impression was that the notary was so concerned with the technological requirements that she was dealing with that she wasn't paying attention to what was happening on the screen. Does that make sense? So here's my tip. If you get involved, don't just go through the motions. Don't just go through the motions. Make sure that you're not only completing the tasks, but that you're also paying attention to what's happening, what's being presented to you. And I know that all of you do that. You wouldn't be here at this conference if you weren't the best of the best. You don't invest in yourself if you're not the best of the best. But how many of you sometimes need little reminders? I do, all the time. So that's my hope is. My hope is that your takeaway is to, one, find out and learn about these scams and how they work and how you can help prevent them, but two, to be reminded of what your role is and how crucial it is and not to just get into the motions. Make sure that you're looking at every aspect of it. You know, when somebody presents you with an ID, you're looking at the back, right? We have claim file after claim file where we have a photocopy of the ID. It's great, it's blown up. Just big enough for us to see this is a novelty item printed across the back. So when you're meeting with people, even if you are one of the individuals who can conduct RON signings, make sure you're asking them to turn it over so you're looking at it. And you're not just turning it over, taking the picture of it as required, that you're actually looking at it as part of the transaction, okay? All right, so this is the tips for how to prevent this type of fraud from the Secret Service. Never allow a seller to arrange for their own notary closing. And my request to all of you here today is that if anything doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, doesn't seem right, make sure you communicate that with whoever booked that signing with you. Whatever type of signing it is, it doesn't have to be a real estate closing, whatever type of signing it is. If something doesn't happen, it doesn't go right, make sure it's communicated with the person who booked that signing with you so that they can take the correct action and make sure to prevent whatever could possibly be going on in the transaction. I have another example for you. This one was stopped by one of our brilliant escrow officers until the signing happened. She called her favorite notary. I mean, her favorite notary that she's worked with for years and years and years. The notary that's done a fantastic job for her over and over and over again. There were so many things that were wrong with the transaction. And so that's why she decided to make sure she had her favorite notary go and meet with the signer. This guy worked the notary over. He told her to meet him at his work, which was like a tune-up garage. She went there. He wasn't there. She called him and said, "Where are you?" "Oh, I've already left. I'm on to the next garage." He went to the next garage. She went to the next garage. He wasn't there. Called him, "Where are you?" "I'm at the next garage." Goes to the next garage. By the way, in every one of these instances, isn't feeling safe, which is not good, not good. She's not feeling safe at all in any one of these instances. She gets to the last spot, and she finally meets up with him and says, "May I see your ID?" "Oh, yeah, I left my driver's license back at the third garage. I don't have it with me." She goes ahead and takes his signature. She goes ahead and notarizes the document. She goes ahead and affixes her seal to the document and returns the document. She didn't say anything to anyone. The transaction closed. Because this is somebody that this closer has counted on for years and years and years. The transaction closed. Here's the good news. The good news is that the escrow officer just wasn't trusting the whole transaction and made him come to her office to present ID for the proceeds check. He still couldn't bring in ID. So she wouldn't give him his proceeds check. Yeah, she wouldn't bring him his proceeds check, yeah. He was the tenant in the property. He was the tenant of the property, selling the property out from underneath the legitimate property owner, or trying to. This imposter fraud is just everywhere. So please really keep your eyes up and really pay attention to this type of situation and making sure that you have the proper ID. Now, here's the one thing that I have to say about the notary who met with this person. First of all, if you're feeling unsafe, abandon ship, man. None of this is worth it. None of it is worth it. Abandon ship. And she said she did tell me she tried to leave, but he got really finicky with her and said, I just need to sign the paperwork. Guess what? Fine, sign the paperwork, and then as soon as you get to Safeway, rip it apart. Don't sign it. Don't put your notary seal on it. Like, whatever it takes to safely get out of a situation like that, do it. Do it. Don't ever put yourself at risk in any circumstances. Which brings me to my next point. My next point is your notary commission. It is your responsibility. Do not ever let your guard down with anyone. Make sure you know what your state-specific notary statutes are in every circumstance. And if you don't proceed until you have found out what those statutes say, what your rules are, what the requirements are. How many of you have been presented with a matricular card? A lot of you, right? Yeah. And here's the thing that's frustrating about that. What's frustrating about the matricular card is it's issued by a foreign government, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, as long as they have ID requirements before they will issue it, right? Because it's not just Mexico that issues them. It's many different countries that issue a version of a matricular card. So first of all, make sure that your notary statutes allow for you to accept that type of ID, if at all. The second thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the country that issued it has identifying requirements before they will issue these, so that you can rely on it. And then, although this is not required by your notary statutes, my next tip is make sure the signer presents you with other types of ID. Not necessarily government-issued IDs, or something else that proves that they are, matches up with the ID. And here's the point. Not only do you want to make sure that that ID is acceptable, but don't ever let somebody pressure you into accepting it if you're not satisfied, if it doesn't meet your statutes. It is not worth it. It doesn't matter if it is your best customer, the customer that gives you tons and tons of business, because guess what? If there is ever a complaint filed against you with your state, they're not going to rescue you. I guarantee it. They're not going to come in and rescue you. Don't do it because an escrow officer tells you to. If I find out about it, I'll put it in place. You don't do something just because somebody tells you you have to take this ID, because you have to move forward with this. Don't ever let your guard down with anyone, ever, ever. I was telling a story earlier about, I was a notary, and one of my colleagues came to me one day and said, "Hey, would you notarize some documents for one of my best customers?" And I was like, "What? This is a really strange request. You've never asked me to come notarize documents for one of your best customers. You're a notary." So I did get up from my desk and I go in and I find out that what they're asking me to do is notarize the best customer's wife's signature. She's not there. Right. And it was hard for me because I'm in an inferior position at this point. I'm not in a, I'm not her supervisor by any means. I was in an inferior position. But I knew enough to say no. I knew enough to say no at that point. And so I did say no, thank goodness. But I could tell you story after story of people who did say yes. And they got their commission revoked. And from what I'm looking at right here, that's your livelihood. Yeah. This is why I have so much passion for what notaries do in and day out. This is your livelihood in many instances. Maybe not all of you, but in many instances, this is your livelihood. Protect it at all costs. Never let your guard down. And again, as a representative of a title insurance company, we're counting on it. We're counting on it. All right? So just as a reminder, if you don't already have these, your do's and your don'ts, here's all your do's and don'ts. These are all the things that you want to make sure that you do, all the things you don't want to do. Don't ever let your guard down. Keep up with these do's and these don'ts. And then let's talk a little bit about the differences between your surety bond, for those of you who are required to have one, versus errors and omissions insurance. If you don't know this, a surety bond, if you have to purchase a surety bond in order for you to obtain your commission, a surety bond is not for your protection. It is for the public's protection. So if there is an issue and somebody feels that they've been harmed by any of your acts, they can file a claim against the surety bonding company. The surety bond will do their investigation and then pay it out. And then guess what? Come back to you to collect the difference. So keep in mind that that is not errors and omissions insurance. Errors and omissions insurance is different. And errors and omissions insurance is a policy protecting you, protecting you. And most of you are not required to carry errors and omissions insurance by your state, but you probably are by your customers, correct? Yeah, by your customers. And that's why, and this is why, we want to be sure that if something does go wrong as one of your customers, that we have the ability to collect if there is a mistake or an error. So it's very, very important to make sure that you understand the difference. And if you're not carrying E&O insurance, to evaluate that very, very carefully. You all are here investing in yourselves to learn more about the industry that you've chosen. Make sure that you're also learning how to protect yourself in that industry that you've chosen. And again, the best way to do that is really to become a member of the National Notary Association. They didn't pay me for this, by the way. I was telling Chris earlier today that I'm a member of a couple of different associations through my work, and they don't do half as much as the National Notary Association does for all of you. I'm blown away. Yeah, give all of these fine people. I am blown away by the resources that they provide to you, the training they provide to you, the hotline ability. It's just fascinating. And they're kind enough to send me their newsletter every week. Y'all get their newsletter every Monday morning? So do I. I learn something all the time. Let's talk about returning executed documents. With all of us conducting business electronically these days and online, we've seen an enormous volume in packages being lost. Lost. But what's really puzzling is that in some instances, they're not lost at all. They're intentionally stolen. Because all of the information on that loan application is ripe for being able to wreak havoc on somebody and commit identity fraud using all of the information contained in their loan application. So what happens is that there are actually people who will break into the FedEx drop boxes. They will intentionally look for packages that are either addressed from or to title insurance companies or lenders and steal those packages, literally steal the packages so they can wreak havoc on individuals and by using their non-public personal information to commit mortgage fraud or other type of identity frauds. So we need your help. We need your help collectively in this industry. Number one, if you have the ability to scan docs back or conduct business electronically, please do it. Because the volume of packages that now go through FedEx and UPS is enormous. And it's disheartening because if you call them to complain, they're like, yeah, it's like a 0.5% ratio. Sorry. Disappointing, right? So when you are returning packages that are original signatures and have to be returned, do everything you can to make sure you're delivering them through a secure location. You're hand delivering it at a FedEx location. You're hand delivering it at a UPS spot. You're getting a receipt for that package so that you have evidence and proof that you dropped it off at that location and it went to somebody in a secure fashion. It didn't just go into a Dropbox that can later be pried open. I wish I could share with you the stories of the boxes where they're actually pried open. They've gone and pried them open. And then get this is our second problem. You're sitting there conducting the signing, you're working with the customer, and at the very end, the customer says, here's my cashier's check. That's not uncommon, right? How many of you have ever had a call from the escrow officer going, where's that cashier's check? Yeah. You know what happens? They get, all their packages come in at the same time, right? 10 a.m., let's say. 10 a.m., a whole bunch of packages all come in all at the same time. They rip open the packages, they pull out the loan docs, and they keep working. Those packages are static. So a lot of times the check ends up stuck in that envelope, and it ends up in the trash. And despite the fact that we dumpster dive on a regular basis, we always seem to figure out this after the trash has been picked up. Yeah. So we need your help with cashier's checks too. And the request is that you put them into a separate envelope. And if you need a separate envelope sent to you, tell the escrow officer or the closer, send me a separate envelope for the cashier's check. And then please take the time to put a penny in that envelope with that check. That way it won't get stuck. It won't stick to the side of the envelope. It will fall out. It will be found. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? All right. Last but not least, again, I just cannot encourage you enough to make sure that you always know, understand, and follow your notary statutes. And if you don't, take advantage of all of the resources that are available through the National Notary Association because they will teach that to you. They will teach all of those notary statutes, regulations, rules so that you make sure that you're following them because I want to be able to see you guys again and the next time I have the opportunity to be at one of these conferences and thriving in your chosen careers. All right? Never let your guard down, okay? Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.